Okay. Hello, good evening. I'm Judith Wielander. I am an independent curator of contemporary art, and my research and practice is focusing on the intersection of art and social engagement. And I would like to present this day my practice in the last 10 years and some projects in particularly. And I would say that I just to make a short introduction where I'm coming from, I started my curatorial practice in 2001 at Cittadellarte, Fondazione Pistoletto. It's an Italian foundation, a private foundation that has been created in '98 at Biella, which is a place in north of Italy, in between Milano and Torino, by Michelangelo Pistoletto. He's one of the main representatives of the arte povera movement, and specifically he created this place as an institution to rethink and reflect on the role of the artist in the society today. And when I heard that he opened this foundation because he was teaching in the Academy of Vienna, and was coming back to Italy in '98 and was founding this place, for me it was immediately clear that I wanted to work with this foundation, and in particular with Michelangelo Pistoletto, because in that time, in that moment of time, it was quite rare that an artist created an organization, an institution that in a certain way wanted to interact with the society and with thinkers of different fields, also to develop alternatives. And therefore I was writing him an email. I was immediately taking a car from Bolzano, where I was living, and after 1 week I started there to work, and I'm still, after 20 years, collaborating with Michelangelo, and maybe more as an independent curator, but I'm still in dialogue, and I'm still thinking that it's an incredible place. It became, I had the chance to collaborate, to start collaborating when it was a very innovative laboratory. Of course, after 20 years, it became an institution, a big organization that maybe has not anymore the spontaneous force that it had in '98 when it started, because Michelangelo Pistoletto was also very, very engaged, and he founded an incredible residency that was hosting every year 16 artists from all over that were there also to develop projects and to empower their art practice also, that they could continue after the residency in the places that they are coming from. And it was incredible because it's a network of people that were collaborating over years also after this experience. So just to say where I'm coming from, so I had the chance in 2010 to create a solo show, and I invited Wael Shawky, an Egyptian artist that in 2009 has been awarded in the Alexandria Biennale, and I had the chance to know his work in this context. I was very impressed, and I was inviting him for a solo show to Biella. So he arrived, and we were discussing what to do. So we were like, we wanted to show his work, but in a certain moment, I have seen that he had on the table a book that I knew well. It was a book from Amin Malouf, The Crusades Through the Arab's Eyes, and a book that has been published in 1983, and it was quite an incredible book because it was the first book that was collecting the chronicles from writers from the Middle East that were writing about the Crusades. And when I've seen the book, because I was doing a literature project 2 years before where this book was, where we have discussed this book, so I was immediately saying, why this book? And Wael was saying, yes, my dream is to do a puppet show and to put in scene this history that has been told by these chronicles, by these writers, by these historians from the Middle East. So in that sense, I was immediately saying puppets, and as in my practice, I'm always trying to also to if I work with an international artist, to get a link to the place where I'm working from. So in this context, I was in Piedmont, and in Piedmont you have an incredible puppet tradition. So I was telling to him why puppets, and he was saying me it has to do, of course, also related to telling history, and of the question also, who is telling the history, who is manipulating, who keeps the strings, and who is telling the story. So he was there for a week. I was immediately doing a research, and I found this incredible collection of puppets nearby in Torino, which was 40 kilometers. And it's a collection of puppets that have 300 years, and it's from the family of Lupi. At that time, this collection was in a cellar, and it was totally not known, because not shown. But the beautiful thing was also that this collection was a family of puppet players of 8 generations, and they were in the 19th century in Egypt, in Cairo, to represent the Aida. So it was also a very interesting link, in the sense also that I was working with an Egyptian artist, and these puppets have been in Egypt with some centuries before. So it was a totally crazy project, because I've never produced a film, and he wanted to do a film. So I like this in a certain way, these challenges, and I think behind my project there is always a strong desire, and also I like fragilities and the risk. So I was saying, why not doing a film? Let's try it out. And so we started. We were renting these puppets from the last Lupi puppet player, that we could have 60 puppets, and that were like very different characters. And we were bringing them to Cittadellarte, and there started an adventure of 9 months. We were like started in 2, and we've ended up in 50 people. So this was a big fight also with Michelangelo, because I had a very small budget of 20,000 euro, and we had to realize a film, and it was very difficult, because also to find puppet players in Italy now is not easy. So the puppets player came from all over Italy, and I started to invite friends, filmmakers, and costumes who could make the costumes and so on. It became months after months a bigger and bigger production, and it was quite an incredible, also very chaotic production, because nobody of us has done this before. So we were really like jumping in a sea. And this is one scene. The first scene was the scene of the plague of 541 after Christie, which was one of the first pandemics also in Europe. That was really a very, very strong pandemic that impacted the European economy in a very, very strong way, and created also the need to find resources in other places for the people to create an economy and survive and to live. So we are jumping now to 1095, when Urban II made the first speech to invite the people to join the Crusades, to invade the Middle East, because also the Crusades was, this film about the Crusade was also the narration of coming from another perspective, that was telling about the conquest also of the West, of the Middle East. So the interesting thing was also, for example, in these scenes where Urban was doing this speech, we have 5 different documentation of this speech, 5 different speeches. So this was a very important point also for Wael, also that he was really questioning also the telling of a history that was the history with a capital letter, but it was really about plural ways of narrating the history. So in that sense, this was a quite important scene also, that there is not only one history, but there are many, many histories and many perspectives, different perspectives. And this film was about the perspective coming from the Arab world, and the Crusades were, this history of the Crusades were told from completely a different way. And so these are some scenes of the film, and here also in 1099, where this first crusade ended the Crusaders ended in front of Jerusalem, and where the Christians invaded Jerusalem and the Byzantine Empire fell. So here, just one image also in relation to the puppets, because well, we used in this first film, because this was the first film that gave the possibility to Wael to create a trilogy. So he was producing other 2 films, the one with in Marseille, with in the frame of the capital of culture, and the third trilogy where he was producing all the puppets in clay, that we could not do because we had not the budget to do. And the third film has been produced by MoMA, where he was producing the puppets in Venice in glass, in Murano, which was quite amazing. And so it was really like, we started with a very small budget in a very modest way, and it ended up with a bigger and bigger production. So for me, it was incredible, because if we would have not started this, then maybe the other 2 films would have not come out. And the other beautiful thing of these puppets was also that we could give life to these puppets in another way. And after the film, after this production also, the puppets had get the recognition, get the visibility, and the region took care about this collection also. So this just some images from the backstage, let's say, how we started in a very simple way to discuss with a young scenographer how to build the scenographies also. So it was really a very practical work that we put together, a great team to build the scenographies, to make the script, to build the stage for the puppet players, called the puppet players, called the people, because also the very particular aspect of this film is also that it was spoken in Arabic, in classical Arabic. And in Italy was almost impossible to find classical people that were speaking classical Arabic. So everything was quite complicated, but we find solution, and we could do it. And this trilogy is now one of the most important artworks of the Middle East, of contemporary art. And it was a work that has been shown, it has been bought it was an edition of 8 films that has been bought in 6 months by the biggest museum. And this was quite, then for us, a beautiful satisfaction also that we could produce such a work with such an incredible artist like Wael, that now is quite a star, but in this moment he was an emerging artist with a great, very talented and a very, very strong, with very clear ideas what he wanted to do. So for us it was really also a learning experience also, and a big group work and participatory work, because we were 50 people working on this film production. These were some scenes also when we were realizing the film. So everything was very crafted, very simple, very easy, realized in a very, we had more enthusiasm than, than possibilities to produce really, to make a serious film production. But in the end, it worked. And this was also related, of course, because the beginning idea was the show. And I'm always with Nico discussing about making exhibitions. So this was one of my last exhibitions in Cittadellarte, but being very not so disciplined, the film production was the core of this project, and I'm very happy that we invested 90% in doing the film and less in the exhibition. I'm a little bit going quickly because so I can show you also very different other projects. So as I was saying, I'm a curator that has done exhibitions, but I was very much always attracted to work outside exhibitions or link exhibitions to the public sphere and its urgencies and problematics. So this was a biennale that where I've been part of the artistic direction, because Michelangelo Pistoletto has been invited by Bordeaux in 2011 to make this biennale, the second edition of Evento. And it was quite an interesting biennale in that moment of time, because the mayor, Alain Juppé, was making a big change of the city from the urban point of view. It was he had this idea he envisioned that in 2030 Bordeaux should become part of this network of the 1 million cities like Copenhagen, Valencia, or Liverpool. So also to get in this network, he got different. There was a big also economical interest behind that was pushing a very strong gentrification of the city in a positive way and also in a negative way, as always. So we have been invited. This was, of course, a urban policy that was coming very much from top to down developed. And with the invitation that for Michelangelo and Cittadellarte to create this biennale, we wanted to reflect on this kind of policies. So we, in difference to the first edition, we didn't invite the 100 artists that was requested, but we invited rather 30 artists, and we wanted, with these 30 artists, we wanted in a certain way to invert the tendency and not develop or intervene in the city from top to down, but rather from bottom up. So we wanted to put in question also this kind of urban policies, and we wanted in a certain way also to try out and envision how would it be possible if we could have see the city as a laboratory, and with the artists we could in a certain way work out visions of alternative ways of living together. So what we have done, we had 2 years. We started with a very big research, mapping the city with the help of sociologists, of urbanists and architecture. We invited this collective cohabitation strategies that really was mapping out the different neighborhoods that were undergoing a very strong transformation, on which neighborhoods there was a big investment, which neighborhoods were rather like neglected because maybe not so interested. So we concentrated our intervention in certain spots of the city where we were thinking that we could in a certain way get in dialogue with the urban policies that would be started in these years. So we were really like very strongly in dialogue with the citizen, and we were inviting artists who wanted to be in dialogue with the city and create networks really to envision different ways to reshape certain areas or certain neighborhoods. So this was, for example, this was a work from a theater group, Ici d'ailleurs, which was like working on floating farming. So this was a work then, of course, we were working 2 years before the Biennale, and the Biennale was 2 weeks. So for us, it was very important also, the whole process before the Biennale in a certain way was, of course, a moment of visibility, a festive moment also, where we were showing and presenting all these visions that has been developed with the artists in dialogue with the citizens. This was a work of Cittadellarte, which were also collaborating with us on the urban politics. It was also a certain way a portrait of the power of a mayor, because Bordeaux has a very particular history that they had mayors that were like in their office for 20, 30 years. So they were always strong personalities. Also, Alain Juppé was mayor from over 20 years, so it's, of course, urban politics have a strong, also very reshaped by strong characters in that sense. This was a project, for example, that we developed over 1.5 years together with Jan van Heijswijk. It was the unfolding of Associative Life, the title, and it was a project which was quite interesting, because this is the Hall des Douves, which was is in Saint-Michel, in a neighborhood where it was the hall of the market. And the city was giving this space, wanted to give this space to the associations, that they could in the future have a house there. But at the moment when we arrived, that the plans have been done already, and it was already architecturally planned, but these plans were not discussed with the associations. So what we proposed to Jan was also, why not rethinking and really make it from bottom up and say, if this is a house of the associations, then we need to get in dialogue with the associations and to think what are their desires, what are their needs, and then shape the space in function of their need. So in the beginning there were 7 associations, and after 6 months she was getting together 70 associations of the city that were coming from the field of the sport, culture, politics, religion, from all kinds. She was meeting every day from 7 o'clock to 2 o'clock, the associations, asking them what they would like, how they would like to, what kind of shape should this house have, and how they would like to interact with the other associations. So, and the Biennale in that sense was in a certain way an exercise, because she was putting together these 70 associations and was creating with them a program for the 2 weeks. So they were really like, it was like the gym, to say how would it be in the future if we would all be in the same house and we would work together. And it happened. It was an amazing experience. That was a 2 weeks program, almost 24 hours, made by all the associations together in dialogue. And of course, this was a project that had a very strong impact. Alain Juppé and the mayor, they completely changed the idea of the original plans of this house. And it was, of course, then replanned and rethought in following up this experience that we could develop with Jan van Heijswijk in the frame of the Biennale. So for me, these are all artistic practice that I'm very interested in a certain way, when it goes beyond the event, when it becomes a process, when it becomes an engagement of an artist that is responding to a request that is coming from a very specific locality or a specific context, and an artist is reacting. In that sense also, for me, Cittadellarte was in that sense interesting, because we were speaking in 2000 about the responsibility, we were discussing and reflecting on the responsibility of the artist in the sense of how artists can respond to society And it was in that years quite a very strong taboo in between institutions, because it was quite we were a little bit timid also to speak about this responsibility in a very strong way, because it was a moment of time also still when that there was really also still the defense of autonomy of the artists, that the artist has not this duty to respond. So, but in this way, for me, it was very interesting also to collaborate with urgencies or requests coming from society. This was another project in another neighborhood. It was Place André Monnier. Here also, there was this place was undergoing a big process of change and transformation, again from top down. We invited Marietitza Protac, which was an architectural collective, and Bureau d'études, which was also a collective from that was very much reflecting on living together, and the question of what shape can take also if this relational process could have a very strong development from the bottom up, in dialogue with the citizens. So this was a square that was was undergoing this process that they entitled Teatro Evolutive, and they were over months in that discussion with the citizens, and they were really like questioning how we could create a space where different species could live together, there could be a coexistence. So they were developing this incredible roof structure, and under this roof structure there were all kind of cohabitations from very, very different species. And this also was very interesting, because it became a space of experimentation, but also a pedagogical space, which was then animated over months, and by the neighbors that were really like enacting this cohabitation with other species that were plants, animals, any kind of, and of course they were like doing this exercise, how to create a completely autonomous ecosystems where water was recycled, where gardens were planted, trees were planted, and there were also, for example, the whole cycle of production of how to recycle water, and how this can also create green areas that before were not existing. This was another project in this frame that was from Claudia Castellucci. It was a school of rhythm. This was also a 9 months project, a school that invited young people to work on the idea of rhythm, and they were then bringing all their research and performative work that they have done in very specific contexts. For example, there was the idea also to interrupt the rhythm of a city and bring a completely different perception of time. So they were like interrupting in libraries, in theaters, in bars, in cafes, in restaurants, in shops, bringing their performative way of reflecting of time and rhythm in a city. This was another project by Construct Lab. It was the marketplace, that in the morning was the marketplace, and in the evening became a place of festivity and of workshops and of different performances. So also to play with a space that has a very precise function, how we can transform this space and give this space completely a different activity. So it was very beautiful when at 12 o'clock the market was shut down, and it started to get a completely other different life from the afternoon on to the evening, this for 2 weeks. This was, for example, we had also, of course, very classical shows. This was a show that I curated in the Musée d'Aquitaine, It was the historical museum because Bordeaux had a very strong history related to the slave trade, which was a history which was only told since some years in the historical museum. So it was a history that was not so much presented, and in that sense, also that it was a very, very strong economy, because also the wine production was in a certain way also had got a lot of resources coming from the plantations and from the slavery economy. So I was doing a show I proposed a show in the Musée Aquitaine, where we were working not on the slavery from the past, but we were developing a show on the contemporary conception of slavery. This was another show we had developed with Arc and Ref, which was the Center for Architecture, together with Stelt and a philosopher. It was a very interesting exhibition because it was based on speculation. It was writing a fiction, because on this also in a certain way to question this idea also of the 1 million city that Alain Juppé wanted to reach in 2030. So Bruce Peguddy's philosopher, together with these two architects, were like writing this fiction that in 2030 there was a big economical crisis, and from Iceland there was starting a boat with many people that had to escape from Iceland, and they were by chance arriving to Bordeaux. That after 1 year they were turning on this cruisery the whole world, and the mayor were saying, we are missing these people to reach 1 million, so let's welcome them. And these people coming from Ireland started to investigate the city, and they were like getting to know a lot of people that were like envisioning a completely different way of living together for the future. And this was the work that they were investigating, Stelt, in dialogue with associations that were thinking about alternative economies, alternative ways also to live in communities. And so they were in a certain way presenting in a fictional way how a city could look like if we can develop visions that maybe are not following the progressist and capitalistic way of thinking a city to do today. So after this Biennale, I arrived I moved to Belgium, and by chance, I met a very young, very talented architect, Bernard Dubois, in a party very late. We were also a little bit drunken, and we started to speak about art and architecture, and very different about our practice, about our passions and our interests. And the day after, we get in touch again together, and as Bernard was saying, there's a competition for the Belgian Pavilion, why we don't create a team and we apply. And I was saying, why not? We can do it. So we were putting together slowly a team with Sébastien Martinez-Barra, Sarah Levy, and Maxime Delvaux, a photographer, very good photographer that is based in Brussels. And we prepared application for the biennial that was curated by Rem Koolhaas on the question of the modernism. So the question was what kind of project we wanted to develop in relation to modernism. So of course I was the only not architect in the team, and I had of course this strong idea also. I brought this input also that it would have been interesting also to respond to this biennale, to the concept of Rem Koolhaas in a very to respond from a social point of view. And so we started to think about interiors, because we were thinking to domestic spaces. And we were saying, of course, in a city you have, like Brussels, you have this incredible heterogeneous architecture, that in the same street you have a facade from the medieval time till the modernism. You have all kind of facades. You see the history, how the city changes. It's a very interesting way which you would have not in Italy. In Italy you have the contrary, because you have, for example, a medieval city that today in the modern time looked the same way like in the medieval time, because there was a very conservative way of keeping the cities. And in Brussels there was a very dynamic way also to that the city changed, and you can see this really also in one street. So then we were saying, what is happening behind this facade, which are quite stable, because then you have also this constant transforming of the interiors by the people, no? Every habitant is changing the interior. So how we can in a certain way also, how could it be interested also for architects today, this kind of architectural way to change by a citizen, by an inhabitant. So then we wanted to say, because we were saying there will be also in a certain way a vernacular way of changing things, changing the spaces, changing the spaces that you inhabit. So in a certain way we were saying this is something that is not, there is not a specific survey very often in architecture about this interior changes made by the inhabitants, and there is not a language also in a certain way how we can find a vocabulary that could become also interesting for architects when they are planning. So then we were saying how to approach this research, and we were like very crazy. We were saying, let's see what is happening in the houses. So we were visiting 250-60 houses in all Belgium over 6 months, knocking on the doors and asking the people if we can enter the houses, and we get in dialogue with them, and we started to understand how did they change their houses, because of course, you know, when there is always economies, the social context, the ecologies are impacting very much how you are producing housing, new housing today, but how you adapt the houses that are existing is not so much, it's not so evident, so it's very invisible. So we were starting with the people to ask, how did you change your house when you entered? And they started to tell us how they changed the houses, how they adapted, how they opened some spaces, how they structurally adapted the spaces to their needs. And so we were starting to photograph the houses, to document the houses, but we were documenting certain patterns that we found in the houses. For example, in this house we found this incredible structure that is quite particular. Or we found this situation. So we were really like becoming very also we wanted to have a very, we wanted to develop a methodology, a strong methodology. So with the photography, we were always, when we found the particularity of this house, we were really like making a straightforward image, always wide angle, always in the same way, to start to have a methodology also in that sense. This also, we found situations which were really like very crazy and very interesting, and we were going from villas to social housing. So we were really like, we made a survey that was really touching very different typologies, very different social classes, very different contexts, also geographically and so on. Or here, for example, we were interested how this space has been divided with these 2 floors, which is quite an interesting solution also to do this, no? Here, how a sofa has been created out of the space. So slowly we found situations that we said there is really also a concept behind, and we started in a certain way to to categorize this and to name also this kind of interventions. And then we were making a selection of these images, of these 1,200 images that we made. We made a selection of 400 and started to find patterns. So, for example, here you see the cheminée that we found very often in houses, and it was very interesting because in many houses we found that the cheminée was dead, it was not anymore used, but it became the space for the screen. So it was interesting. It was also telling the story about a society that transformed from a raw material society to a technological society. Or we found situations that or structural intervention or objects that had not anymore lost their functionality or lost their mobility. So we started really to name these things. For example, this was a cold. This was, for example, I have to just look. This was the cold herd. That were this group of cheminées that has been all used to place the computer or the screen. Or we were like also calling the other categories approximation or inalienable objects that were all objects that lost their mobility. So we really started to name it. We really created this vocabulary on this vernacular intervention. And it was, of course, also in a certain way a very interesting research on domestic spaces, but also that this kind of interventions had was not nominated, so it was not existing. In the sense that we started to nominate, it existed also. And it could become an interesting reflection also for architects in the future in planning houses, that there was also in a certain way, a language that is existent and that could have been taken in accountance. So there in the pavilion, then we were like bringing and showing and installing. We used the pavilion like a domestic space again, and we were like installing the patterns and the categories that we found. We were like reinterpreting them in a very, maybe in a more abstract way, but we were bringing the examples that we have seen in the houses of the Belgian people. So it was quite a big research that was structured in the catalog that was collecting the 400 interiors of the houses and that we found and we selected. And then there was this setting up that we brought also to Venice, where we were showing this interiors, facts and figures, and we interpreted it in an exhibition display that was reflecting what we have found in Belgium. 2015, I started another project in Belgium that I had the chance to be involved in a biennale that was commissioned by the IBGE, which is the office of the Green Office of the city. And there they have done several editions of this Biennale Parckdesign, which was focusing on rethinking furniture for the parks. And so they were inviting designers to rethink furniture that could be useful for the parks and could, in a certain way, also facilitate the gathering of the people in a city where the green space represents, in a certain way, a space of leisure, a space of relaxing, a space of freedom in a certain way also. So we called our project Jardin Essential. And I developed this project with Gili Karievski and with a big team. And it was interesting because we got the commission of this design biennale, and in the moment that 2015 when Brussels were undergoing the bombing attacks, and it was a very, very big tension in the city, and after the bombing, of course, and there was this, we had this biennale to do in a park, and we were saying, how is it possible now to work in the public sphere where everything will be super controlled and everything will be, there will not be the wish to gather people. So we were really like saying, we are maybe not in the right moment, but we were like seeing it as in another way, and we were saying maybe we can use this moment, this biennale, this frame also as a moment of healing, because the green space in that sense could be also a space of healing, a space of resting, a space that in a certain way could become very important, where people can gather, because we found it was important that the public sphere became again a space of trust, a space of dialogue, and that it was very important to have this counter narration. So we were, of course, not very much reacting to the request of inventing furniture with artists, but we were rather interested in reflecting and inventing and visioning with artists new relational space in a park. And so we have chosen the Parckdesign, which was a park in Saint-Gilles, in the top of Saint-Gilles. And it's a very interesting park because it's a park that has a very strong colonial history. And it was also the site where Leopold II had installed the first topical medicine, the research center for topical medicine, which is today in Antwerp. But at that time, in the beginning of the century, it was in a villa in the top of this garden. And there were this medical garden, and this was for us in a certain way the inspiration also to say we are working in a park, we are working on the question of healing. We wanted to have also the park to understand it as a place where there can be of taking care. So we were saying, why not implanting a medical garden where there was a medical garden. We have seen this esplanade in the beginning of the Parckdesign, and it was amazing. It was a 3,000 square meter lot that was just with green grass. And we were visiting it, and I was like saying, we were like saying to the director of the park, we were saying, wow, this would be good, this would be beautiful to become a garden. Really a garden with medical plants, and he was saying, why not? And then we were starting to say, well, let's start to think to a garden, because it had also a very effective stage. It was really like, in a certain way, a stage, this garden that was not used. And we were immediately saying, this is a garden that we want that it stays, that it's the whole project, the whole biennale, the event should become something that let a trace for the people, for the city. That was really a space that the citizen could not only live and experience during a biennale, but also after. So the idea was really to create a garden of medical plants. So this is the top down, where you see how the garden was in the beginning before we had made the intervention. Up. And then we started to develop this idea together with the decorators, which is a collective, quite an interesting collective that are working very much on design and urban intervention. And we were starting with them to discuss about the history also of the place, because before it was a private garden, it was also a monastery. So the idea of the medical garden became very, very interesting. And we were also thinking that the medical garden were also in a certain way a place that could also in a certain way represent that society, like in the medieval, the monastery was a community. It was a very specific way of living together. And we started to brainstorm with them how we can recreate a community in this spot. So we started to to plant the garden with Rudy Leuters, which is an artist from a Belgian artist that is quite experienced to conceive gardens. So we invited with him and we were proposing him and we were saying we want to create a medical garden in this scale, and he was like accepting the challenge because he was saying it's quite crazy, but let's try to do it. And so we started really to, from the beginning on, to plant the gardens. For us, it was the idea that in 1 year, in the months before and during the Biennale, that was 3 months, we wanted really to produce the whole cycle. We wanted to plant the seeds, we wanted to create, to make the garden, and we wanted to transform the plants, because also we wanted to distill the plants, because the distillation we read it also, distilling culture and nature, but also transforming the plants and creating the essential oils, the hydrolates, really to transform and produce also the healing essences together with the people, and the healing process is doing the cycle in that sense. So we started to simply to invite people from the neighborhood that were passing by to garden with us, and it became more and more an attraction as the plants were starting to grow. And the more people came, and it became really a place that the people wanted to live, and we started to organize workshops with herbalists. We made workshops on also on horticulture, all kind of workshops. So it was really like, became a place that was really lived, and gardeners came. It was becoming really a beautiful situation. So this just very quickly also to say that the place had also, we had the commission also to create a pavilion. So this was the pavilion we developed with, from the beginning idea of the monastery, it became this more contemporary interpretation, reading, working with Piovene Fabi, which is a collective of architects, and the decorators were developing the pavilion with us, which was a place where we wanted to transform the plants into healing essences. So there was the Distillation Tower. We conceived it as quite as a modular space that had a stage, a bar, cooking and a kitchen section, and a distillation tower where we could transform the plants. And the idea was also to conceive this place as a choreography that could change every day. So there were very different possibilities, and the choreography was also the idea in relation that we were starting from the concept of a monastery as a living community. So it could be used in the morning for workshop, in the afternoon for presentations, in the evening there could be very different activities. This is the realization of the pavilion. I'm going a little bit quicker now, just to give you also the atmosphere, what was happening. So the distillation tower, where we were drying the plants, we were distilling the plants, and it was like a laboratory, but what that opened every day in the morning and was closing in the evening for 3 months. We were collecting plants, and there were the activities. And they were like, then it was very beautiful because we had, of course, a planned program, a structured program with some artists with whom we were developing projects around this garden, but then started to come a very spontaneous program were added that were developed by the people. So we were really like creating a space where the people could propose very different activities. So this, for example, was hummus, a collective, a cook collective that was asking us to cook. So we were like, it was a cook that wanted to work on the distillation within his plates and within his creations. So we organized, and he came 8 times, 8 evenings, where he was doing a program of degustation. And for example, there was a seed library. We were collaborating with 5 seed libraries of Brussels. We put them together because we wanted to get also out the seeds of the garden, that it was redistributed and disseminated in other neighborhoods. And these 5 libraries that we were collaborating with us were doing workshops on how to create a seed library, and they were, of course, then spreading the seeds all over again. So it was in the evening, it was in the morning, so it was really like a very, very active place where any kind of activity could have been organized. There were also like drawing sessions, people drawing plans, or this was a spontaneous program also. They were like, they work with the seed libraries, collecting, cleaning the seeds. We were collaborating with artists here. For example, we were collaborating with the cooking section, who made a very interesting project that was called Invasive is Not Native. It was on an extract of the project they were developing in UK on Falloppia japonica, which is an invasive plant that in the last 10 years was had a big impact on the agriculture in agricultural production in UK, and was for like pushing many agricultors to suicide because this invasive plant was totally destroying their production. So there was a big reflection by these artists on how to turn these invasive plants in something positive, in something different, and they were transforming these invasive plants in ice creams here in our case that we were selling. And of course, this was the excuse also to work on the whole project they were doing in UK, and also on the question of autochthonous plants, invasive plants, but also in relation to society. What does it mean? Autochthonous and invasive in that sense. This was a collective from Los Angeles that was producing parfum essences from the garden. There was also École Mondiale, which was a big project from Philip van Dingen, but that maybe you know also, École Mondiale. That was a project, a school project that was developed in 95 by Leopold II, planned, not realized, which was a school that should prepare the officers for the colonizers, prepare them to their work in the colonies. It has never been realized, but they are turning down this idea, and are working more in a completely different way now, also to developing this field station where they are working on the question of decolonization, on the question of healing, alternative production of knowledge, sharing knowledge, and so on. So they had conceived a very big project also in our context related to healing, which was a very beautiful experience. So the space changed every day. This was a project that we have done over months with the workers from IBG about their vision of nature and culture and interaction on that. So it was quite an interesting way also to bring this Biennale back in the offices where they were working, and to know their point of view. So this was the IBG office headquarters, where we were also present to develop the project with different workshops. This was a night school we developed with Aleppo and Daniel Blanco Gubai, where we invited a series of philosophers also to discuss and present their researches on the interaction of culture and nature. Here, for example, we have screened the film of on Donna Haraway, and it was beautiful because we were in the forest. Here, it's a lecture of Timothy Morton that that organized in this frame of the night school. Performances, all kind of activities, concerts. Okay, that is just some images more of the atmosphere. And today it's a garden that after the Biennale, we handed over to a collective. The last months, we were working on establishing a group, a core group that could take over the garden and autonomously after the Biennale, when we leave, to develop forward the garden. And it happened, and it's still a collective garden that is organized by neighbors and different groups of people that are taking care and continuing the garden and offering this space to the citizens. I don't know how. Visible, another project I'm developing since 10 years, more or less. It's a research project on social engaged art practices in a global context, and this was a commission that Michelangelo made me in 2010 when I was working on the exhibition project also of Wael, because we were saying in that moment of time there was not really a research on long-term projects that are developed by artists in very specific locales where the artists are not committed to develop an artwork, but they are responding to an urgency and they are developing a project over years. In this project, this process, this artistic progress becomes an institution, becomes an organization, becomes an autonomous entity that is very often organized in a participative way, that could become a school, that become an alternative economy, that becomes a pedagogical platform that can take any kind of shape or form, but that in a certain way is really an art process that is responding to a specific question that inspired the artist. So this is just an image of Cittadellarte, and this project has been developed with another foundation, private foundation, Fondazione Pistoletto, that is an Italian fashion label. So all these projects are visibly founded by two private foundations. It's of course inspired by Michelangelo's work also that he developed from the 60s on. Here now it's, for example, a very interesting manifesto of the 90s, Progetto Arte, where Michelangelo is really putting in question also, as I said before, the role of the artist and the responsibility or the desire, the need to respond to certain urgencies of the society. And Visible, the title also, we have chosen this title because we were really interested to give visibility to this kind of practices that are not developed within an institutional context, but rather outside of the institutional context. So these were practices developed by the artists that were not so well known, because often artists are also developing projects that they don't want to be immediately under a spot or under a pressure, but they need time to develop in a very free way certain processes, and maybe only in a certain moment of time they open the process and they feel that this artistic project is ready to be known also in a certain way. And very often the institution, we found that the institutions had they didn't know about this kind of projects. So there were very interesting projects happening maybe in Australia, in Africa, in South America, that the institutions didn't know. And the institutions had not the know-how or the competence or the interest to show or to exhibit these projects in a exhibition, because very often these kind of processes were reduced to be shown in a display that could be an archive or could be images also on a table. It was also years where these kind of practices were not so much represented within an institution, because not always they were object-based, because maybe it was more a relational network that was also very complicated to represent in an exhibition. So I started this research through a publication, because I wanted, first of all, understand very different ways of reading of this intersection of art and social engagement. So I produced this publication. I found this was an interesting way and an interesting space to create a dialogue between many curators that are working in a very specific locale or in a very specific geographical, cultural context, and are very close in contact with artists that are developing such kind of projects. So I invited 9 curators, and I proposed them 9 chapters where they could develop almost an exhibition project, or almost a space where they could represent projects that from their point of view are interesting projects that are intervening in this, are transforming society today. So this first insight overview showed to us, to the who commissioned us, Fondazione Pistoletto, who was putting the budget, which is not a foundation that is a foundation that is from an enterprise, because we were showing them, because they were in the beginning in a certain way asking us, they want to do a collection, and we were proposing them to collect artistic processes, not objects, and we were saying how to collect this, because it was not existing, a collection of artistic processes. So in a certain way, we need to show them also the potentiality behind this kind of practices. So it was really a dialogue that started over years with them in a very, very strong dialogue, where we were in a certain way convincing them that maybe it's time now not only to collect objects, but really also to find ways to collect or give visibility to a series of practices that are not anymore a niche. They are not anymore a product that is not there. It's almost a movement. And because we collected in 10 years 200 projects over that were all disseminated in all different geographical and cultural contexts. So we wanted not only this project started also that we were saying, okay, let's give visibility, let's create almost the idea of a collection of this kind of processes, but how we do this, how we can do a research. At that moment, I invited Matteo Lucchetti, which was a very young curator in that time. I asked him immediately to work with me on this project and on this collection, let's call it, of artistic processes. But we immediately said also that it's very important not only to research these practices, but also produce these practices and support these practices. So we were saying we wanted to, in a symbolical way, to support these practices, and the commissioner were asking us also, okay, you don't want to do an exhibition, you want to research, but then you give us also something that we can say, we put money in this, because, we can also say we support it. So the idea was to give them a moment of visibility, strong visibility, and we decided to create a grant. We decided to create a grant that of 25,000 euros that we would give to a very strong practice every 2 years. So in this way, we were starting also to do how we find these practices. Then we were saying we had 2 people, we had no budget to travel. We had how to do this. So we were just saying, let's do it collectively. We contact a network of people that are very close to this kind of practices, young curators or emerging curators. So we were saying every 2 years we invited 60 curators to suggest 2 projects that for them are very strong practices in this moment of time, and they have a strong impact really on the reality in which they are emerging. And so we collected every 2 years 60 projects. These 60 projects we started to analyze. That now you see these projects, we collected them also in an online archive that has been then in a certain way also structured through keywords of strong topics. We call it topics that are in this moment, topics that are very important from, you can see it here, questions related to feminism, environmental issues, impacting mediascapes, indigenous rights, legal loopholings, making assemblies, migrant crisis, pedagogical platforms. So in this way, these 200 projects are also available, accessible for the audience, and they can also be navigated. So if also from an audience that is not art-based, but from an audience maybe coming from another field. So if I am a journalist, or I am an expert that is working on indigenous rights, if I go to this topic, I see maybe 10 projects of artists that in very different areas of the world are focusing on the question of indigenous rights or on the migrant crisis. And it's also research that we wanted to bring out of the art field. So we really wanted also to address a very different audience. So in a certain way, we were working on a different public, but we were working also in the same time how to bring this kind of practices back in the institutions and impact the institutions also on how they could work with these kind of practices today. Because for an institution, beginning of 2010, Tate was saying, yes, it's interesting, but how can I work with a collective of Aborigines that they are producing films in Australia on their conditions, on their question, on their social context. How can I support this? How can I then show them, or can they represent? So we have chosen every 2 years to collaborate with an important institution where we discussed the 60 projects, and we decided to organize together the grant. We analyzed with the curatorial team, and we directed the projects, and we were in this way we were really also discussing the methodology, how to work with this kind of projects. These were very different museums. And then we were saying also how to evaluate these kind of projects. Of course, the first year of the award, we were organizing it in behind closed doors with super experts of the art field like Hans-Ulrich Obrist, Uta Meta-Bauer, Okwi Envesor. And we made a day-long discussion on these 60 projects to shortlist them to 10, and to shortlist them to 3, and then to decide the winner. And in the end of the evening, we were saying why this discussion is not public, because it's a discussion where we could learn so much. So then we were like starting to say, we want to organize these juries that normally are happening behind door publicly, and we were calling them temporary parliaments, and we were in this sense bringing all this content, all this interesting, innovative way of working with society by artists to a public. Of course, we didn't want to expose the artists in a popular way, but we wanted to create the right conditions to have a very interesting discussion, and that the decision-making process in a certain way could be shared but could not be handed out on a popular vote. So we were deciding that with these museums that we are working every 2 years, we are creating this short list of 10 projects that could all win, all get this the award, but we opened the discussion one day with a big public. So we started to do it in Eindhoven in 2013 with 70 people, where we had still a jury on one side and the other side the public. In 2015, we had not anymore this structure. It was just an assembly that was discussing the projects for a whole day. Of course, it was very prepared, moderated, and done in a way that all the artworks, all the art projects were treated in a very equal way. And then in the evening, there was the public vote, and this public vote decided the recipient of the grant, and it was a grant of 25,000 euro that the artist could got, and we, in a certain way, as curators, protected the artists to the commissioners, that they had the total freedom to do with this money, to use this money how they wanted. So if they needed to buy a car or a computer or building, they could do it. So we had not, there was no particular conditions, because we wanted also to shrink down all this bureaucratic process that is very often and related to this kind of grants. So then we started also in 2017, we were collaborating with the Queen's Museum, which was the site of the United Nations formerly, before becoming a museum, and we were in a certain way inverting the process, and we were saying how we can create a parliament in a museum, and then we were working with designers to create a model, how we could create, how a museum could become a temporary parliament also from today to tomorrow. And in 2019, we were collaborating with with Paris, with Lafayette Foundation, and we were doing the temporary parliament in Hotel de Ville. So for us, this was a very interesting symbolic step, that we were bringing in the Hotel de Ville that is deciding every day the politics of a city, to bring one day inside 10 projects that are discussed also by an assembly, in the sense also because these projects are also related to the transformation of society, of urban context, rural context, in all over the world. For this edition, we were collaborating with Curator Lab, which is a master program in Sweden. This was some images about the discussion the whole day, and we were collaborating with this master program in Sweden that became the advocates of the projects. So we were doing a 1-year preparational work with the students that they on advocating this kind of projects in a context of a parliament. Now we stopped the award, because we were saying the award it's not anymore time to have an award, because it was anyway a very competitive situation. So what we are now trying to do is to transform Visible, and that it becomes a platform that brings this kind of projects that are not always material based, not always object based, in collections of museum, and that the budget of the collections could be used from the artists to develop their project in their specific locale, but that there becomes a formal relation, and how they could become part of a collection in that sense. So we are writing in this moment of time a protocol, a manifest, together with Michelangelo and with a group of curators and artists, that could become guidelines for museum, how to include this kind of practices in their collections, and how we could not only give one award to one practice a year, but how we could give several grants to the artists that could then develop their projects all over the world. So we call this is for us, it's the shift from the Visible Award to the fellowship platform. Here, just as an example, this was a research that we have done collectively, another bibliography that has been commissioned by the Public Art Agency of Sweden, which is the oldest public art agency of Europe. And it was very interesting, because they wanted to have a bibliography. And we were saying it would not make sense to write a bibliography by us, but again, as we have done for the projects, we would like to write this bibliography collectively. So we invited 10, 12 curators and thinkers to suggest books that in this moment of time could in a certain way be of inspiration for the artists that are working on the question of the public sphere and social engagement. This annotated bibliography is also online, so it's related to the archive also, and it's related to the topics that we are, through which we are structuring also the archive. So it's an enrichment. It's not just the practices, but it's related also to thinkers and writers that are writing about these topics. So also in a certain way we are enriching this archive in a certain way also with a space of reflection. This is a project that I am doing very quickly in Rome in this moment with Sara Alberani, Valerio De Balvio, with Matteo, who is collaborating with me on Visible. And it's a project that is, has been committed by Pala Expo Roma, which is a big exhibition institution. And we are working with 3 artists, cooking sections, Jasmine Pateja and Joanna Fricot, which is a curator. But we are working with them on the question of the 2030 agenda of the sustainable development. And this project in a certain way has the aim to put in dialogue artists and policymakers. So we are working with we are approaching the United Nations in a certain way in these discussions, and we are closely working also with the United Cities and local governments. We are organizing in the next weeks a workshop. It's the first workshop that is run by artists for this big network of cities. It's 240 cities, and it's cooking section who is presenting them a workshop, who's doing a workshop with them on Climavore, which is a project they are developing on Island of Skye since years, and it's related to the food consumption in a moment, how the food consumption can impact the climate change. So in this sense, they are discussing with these mayors and policymakers how we can take out also the salmon from how we can create salmon-free cities and salmon-free institutions today, because they are working in Island Sky really on this focus of the salmon farms, which are a big problem and are impacting in an incredible way the coasts and the oceans. And how they are not only in a certain way saying we have to stop this farming, but they are in the same way, in a proactive way, producing alternatives. And with the mayors, they are discussing this production of alternatives. And with them, we are also, in this context, creating a media campaign on the social media. Jasmine Pateja is an Indian artist that is working since 2013 on the violence against women and the question of violence related to gender. So with her, we are producing a podcast series on her movement, because she's creating an incredible movement in India on these questions. And with Joanna Griot, she's a curator, an Afro-descendant curator based in Rome. We are developing a space which is missing in Italy. It's a space of plurality, which is also representing another cultural narration that is totally missing of the second and third generation of Italians that are still not citizens in Italy, because it's a law that is still not gone through. Also, if you are born in Italy as a non-Italian, you are not a citizen of Italy. So we have generations now of people that are born and living in Italy since 30, 40 years, but they are not citizens. So, and this is also a community that is totally not represented in cultural life. So we are now trying to, through this process, also to create a space like La Colonie or Savi that could in a certain way represent this community and their cultural perspective. This is a project the last one, I'm developing in Taranto. Taranto is the most toxic place in south of Italy, in Puglia. but it's the most toxic place of Europe because there is has been installed ILVA, which is an eco monster of an industrial area that is 3 times the city, that has been installed in the 50s, almost in the city, and is producing now since decades very toxic dioxin, and is polluting the whole city, and is the people living is exposed since decades to an incredible danger also, and many people are sick in a very beautiful city which was one of the capital of Magna Graecia. But there is also an incredible history of 30 years of activism, environmental activism. There are more or less 40 associations which are fighting to close this in the industrial complex, which is totally illegal. Now, the conditions in which the workers are working are totally illegal and not illegal. And what is also interesting, that this history of these environmental activists is totally invisible for the outside of Taranto. This industrial complex has been bought by Mittal, which is a big industrial and entrepreneur of India, who is buying all this decadent industrial complex all over the world, pushing the production in the last years without any, not regenerating or not creating better conditions for the workers, but just to exploit maximum the complexes. And an artist, Ilaria Lupi, who is working on this kind of questions, was researching in Taranto on these activist movements, and she was doing a very simple action. 2 years ago, she was screening in a square a film produced by Arte on Mittal, telling who is Mittal. So it was bringing in the square the portrait of this entrepreneur that is exploiting this industrial complex, and the people didn't know. So there were like 600 people looking to this film to understand who bought this industry that they have that they have next to them in their city. And from this, there was a very interesting figure. This is Pietro Motolese. This is a dissident worker. He was working over 40 years in the ILVA industry. And when he stopped to work because he was sick also, he, from the association, one of the association, Peace Link, gave him a camera to record everything what is happening, because they were saying, you know the industry, so you need to shoot all. So we have slowly we have testimonies also to denounce things and to bring questions in the tribunal. So he started in a very interesting way, day after day, to record and to testimonial and to document manifestations, every initiative that happened around the ILVA complex for 30 years. And he was, when Ilaria Lupi, this artist, was organizing this event to show the film screening, the day after he approached her and said to her, I have to show you something. And he brought her to his house, and then there was like an infinitive years of recording in VHS, in digital, totally there, and he handed it over to her. And it's an archive on the history of the activism in Taranto, which is one of the most strongest, but nobody knows this, and it's totally invisible. So what we are now proposing is to create a center of contemporary art and new political ecologies, where this archive becomes the center and the core, but develops also collaborations, long-term collaborations with artists on alternatives, and that it produces, of course, exhibitions maybe, but it produces also a school on political ecologies and art, and a strong movement that, a summit, a parliament that happens every year that could become a space for the young generation also to take over this knowledge that has produced a bit experts in the school, and to start really to become a pedagogical platform for this next generation. This why, because I think for me when I have visited it was incredible touching, because I went through the city and there is no culture, nothing. There is, I went in a bar, when I there met the owner of the bar made a big battle to initiate the oncological department of the hospital, and it's for the children. And it has been installed through a crowdfunding and through a project by this citizen, which has not done by the state and has not done by the industry. This industry is like exploiting the city without giving back anything. And I think the claim that is also coming from this activists is really that the only way that they can transform this reality is through culture. So they were asking for culture, that they can develop alternatives, that they can really go out of this nightmare that is produced by a very capitalist exploitation, and start maybe to rethink their context and their reality. So we are really discussing now the foundings and how we can organize this center. So sorry that I took so long. I don't know if you have still energy for questions, I don't know. But I wanted also to say that I'm very happy because Nico invited me 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, to develop with him a program in the context of the academy, a program that is related to this kind of practices also. And for me it was very beautiful that he proposed it to me, because I've never worked in an academy, I've never worked in the university context, so I think it's really for me now interesting also to have an exchange with this generation of artists, in a sense, in a pedagogical frame, because I think it's interesting to maybe to create a rather space of learning in that sense, where we can also develop different visions also, how artists today can not only produce their projects or their objects or artworks, or let's call it as we want, but that they produce the artworks also in thinking and inventing the context, because I think it's very important that the artists are also putting in question if the frame in which they are presenting their work, if it's still the most interesting one, or if we can have also in this sense a plurality next to the white cube, or frames that are biennales or are in this sense like very institutionalized contexts that are also a rigid structure, no? And I think it's interesting to reflect on this bit together. So I'm really looking forward, and I will be very often here. So if today you have not energy for questions, we will discuss it next months and years, hopefully. For the yes, I think so. But I think the most important thing, especially in this academy, for the first figure out artists, I include myself in this field. It's really difficult in the bachelor in this program to identify yourself as artist and field. And also the second main point in here is to the Mm-hmm. 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 I think we are in an interesting moment of time because I don't know, when Nico and me, we met, we were meeting in a frame of a Biennale in Turin, big social game. And these were, you know, these were practices that were really like not considered as art. And as, again, you know, speaking about social engagement, it was something that we were, you know, the people were looking to you and saying, what are you speaking about? Today we, you know, this is the main mission. You have this big institution of 2030 agenda. You have sustain, you know, there is, I think it's time to, the people want to, you know, also, these mayors with whom we are discussing this kind of practices, they understood that the artists have this capacity also to imagine the future. Because if you have not images, if you don't offer images to the people, they cannot change. And I think in that sense, it's very important, the potential of the artists. But I think also in the academy itself, it's important that that the students force also the change, and you know, that they name things, because also in naming things, they become urgency, they become needs, they become, you know, in that sense, it's important that it starts also inside the institution, the change. And like, you know, also, for example, Wael Shawky, which was a young artist at that moment, we were 9 months together in Cittadellarte, and he was in Cittadellarte and have seen Michelangelo, that was like building this incredible foundation, offering to young artists to stay there 4 months. He came back after these 9 months. He was like starting an amazing, going on in empowering his career that he was already building very well, but he founded a school. So he founded a place of residency, an independent place that he was, you know, creating, you know, and then it became a school that he was sharing with others. And I think what is interesting is that these artists are creating the institutions. They are creating also the context. They're not anymore depending only on the institutions that say, "Well, we do the exhibition, you bring out the object and we do it." But they are creating institutions, so they're changing already the art field in that sense.
Artist from Visible Project, who's doing the project in Guatemala, is activated his heritage with new techniques from Indian women. So for me, that was, oh my God, it's somebody like me. So it was really cool to see that.
And the thing, just to end also, the interesting thing is also, you know, after 10 years, 1 year ago, the commissioner, the foundation of the enterprise, they were saying, now we understand what we are doing, you know? They were supporting us for 10 years. We had not big budget, but they were supporting us. And I think this is interesting also to work with someone, you know, that is not from the art, because it was 10 years of dialogue to make them understand why they invest in this project and not maybe in a collection as all the other collectioners. Or the fact also that these projects now they are visible because we put them together, we put them in dialogue. This is the, you know, we were showing there is a movement, and they are looking to each other and they are exchanging. We have seen that they are now collaborating also without our mediation, but of course, and this 10 years ago were not like existing, was not visible. So they were not existing for the institutions. Now the institutions see they exist, and they are changing also their way to work with this kind of practices. So they find new ways of, the new narrations around. Maybe it's not, maybe a show the best way, but maybe it could become a documentary, it could become, you know, other kind of narrations or narratives also that they could develop in with the museum.